The great hall of the Galactic Union buzzed with voices. Every representative from every world had gathered after the alarming news. Entire star systems had gone silent. No signals, no survivors. The cause was still uncertain, but the word spreading across the stars was the same. The void blight. The enormous hall shimmered with lights from dozens of planets. The atmosphere was filled with tension and fear. Even the proudest species, known for their power and wisdom, whispered in unease. Commander Elias Ward stood quietly at the back, watching and listening. He could see fear in the faces around him, scaled, feathered, metallic, and even crystal-like. Every being had the same expression: disbelief. The Predator King, Rothkar, sat on his throne at the head of the assembly. His golden eyes scanned the crowd. "We have faced many threats before," he said firmly. "Wars, hunger, cold. But this is not an enemy that fights. It simply takes." The hall grew silent. Rothkar looked toward Elias. "Human," he said, his deep voice echoing through the room. "You have studied this darkness. Tell them what you know." Elias stepped forward. His small figure looked almost fragile under the tall, glowing arches. Yet when he spoke, his voice was calm and strong. "The void blight does not destroy planets by force," he said. "It absorbs energy. Light, sound, power, and even movement. It spreads like silence. Once it touches a world, everything becomes still." A whisper ran through the assembly. An elder from the crystalline species asked, "Can it be stopped?" Elias took a breath. "Maybe not by fighting it directly, but perhaps by confusing it." The word confused several delegates. "Confusing it? You speak of a weapon that feeds on energy," one shouted. "What can confusion do?" Elias smiled faintly. "Everything alive follows patterns, even things we don't understand. The blight follows energy signals that are regular and easy to trace. What if we break the pattern? What if we make something unpredictable? Something it cannot read?" The room fell quiet. Rothkar tilted his head. "You wish to trick the darkness?" "Yes," Elias replied. "Humans have always survived by confusing stronger predators. If strength fails, intelligence and creativity remain." Many laughed at first. Some found the idea amusing, that a small human would dare to use tricks against a force that consumed stars. But Rothkar did not laugh. He stared at Elias with deep curiosity. "Explain your plan," the king said. Elias turned on a holo display, showing a simulation of moving lights, planets, fleets, and energy waves. "The blight hunts energy," he explained. "So we give it what it wants, a trail. But the trail will not be real. We'll send false signals from hundreds of empty satellites. When it follows, we trigger a magnetic field that closes around it, not to destroy it, but to contain it." The hall erupted with mixed reactions. Some called it impossible. Others whispered that it might work. The king finally stood and silenced the room. "Enough," he said. "This human's idea is strange, but courage often sounds strange before it wins. We will test it." He turned to Elias. "You will have my fleet." Elias blinked in surprise. "Your Majesty, are you sure?" Rothkar gave a small grin. "If we are to face darkness, then we will do so beside the one who dared to challenge a king." The hall grew quiet again. No one dared to argue. That evening, the Valkyrian palace glowed with golden light as preparations began. Fleets were equipped with beacons and signal transmitters. Thousands of engineers worked side by side, building what Elias had designed. A network of decoy satellites that would lead the blight into a containment zone. Elias worked tirelessly, reviewing maps, adjusting frequencies, and running simulations. He spoke to scientists from dozens of species, teaching them how to create unpredictable patterns. The Valkyrian warriors, who once mocked him, now stood beside him with respect. Even Tarak, the tall guard, now acted as his assistant. "Human," Tarak said one night as they studied data together. "When we first met, I thought you were weak, but now I see something else." Elias smiled softly. "And what do you see now?" "A kind of strength that doesn't roar," Tarak said thoughtfully. "It whispers, but it never breaks." Elias laughed quietly. "Then maybe that's what humanity really is. Soft voices that never stop trying." Days turned into weeks. Finally, the fleet was ready. Hundreds of ships, Valkyrian hunters, human frigates, and Union cruisers, lined up near the edge of a dying star system. The void beyond was silent, empty, and dark. This is where it will come, Elias said, pointing at the holomap. The blight follows energy and the dying star gives off unstable waves. It will be attracted here. Hrothgar stood beside him, tall and steady. And if it doesn't work? Elias met his gaze. Then we learn and try again. The king's expression softened. You truly are a strange kind of warrior, human. Elias chuckled lightly. I'll take that as a compliment. When the day came, every ship stood ready. The containment grid surrounded the system like a web of light. The decoy signals pulsed in a rhythm that no machine could predict. Random, alive, and constantly changing. The king sat in his command throne, while Elias stood beside him, watching the data streams. The silence outside felt endless. Then, a shadow appeared on the edge of the star's glow. It wasn't a ship nor a storm. It was absence, a moving void that swallowed light as it passed. The blight, Elias whispered. Alarms rang softly. The fleet held formation. The shadow grew larger, spreading like ink across water. Stars behind it vanished. Even the sensors began to fail. Steady, Elias said calmly. Do not fire. Just hold the signal pattern. The void moved closer, slowly but certainly following the fake energy trail. Every light in the control room dimmed as if the creature's hunger reached through space itself. Elias adjusted the signal rhythm, making it faster, then slower, then faster again, keeping it unpredictable. The king glanced at him. How do you know it will follow? Elias smiled faintly. Because curiosity exists in everything, even in the dark. The blight drew nearer. The fleet began to lose power and panic spread across the communications channels. Stay calm, Elias said over the radio. Trust the plan. Finally, the shadow moved directly into the center of the grid. Elias pressed a sequence of commands. The satellites around the system came alive, releasing a powerful pulse of magnetic light. The void shuddered. For a moment, everything went completely silent. Then the screens showed something remarkable. The blight was no longer spreading. It was contained, trapped inside a glowing sphere of energy. Cheers filled the ships. The Valkyrians roared in triumph, their voices echoing through the comms. Hrothgar looked at Elias with astonishment. You did it, Elias shook his head. We did it, the king smiled, a true, deep smile of pride. Perhaps the galaxy has been blind, he said softly. We thought humans were fragile, but now I see the truth. You fight with thought, and that is something no creature can devour. Elias exhaled slowly, relief flooding his chest. Let's make sure it stays that way. As the fleet prepared to return home, news spread across the stars. The story of how a human and a predator king worked together to trap the darkness reached every world in the Union. Species that once mocked humanity now spoke their name with respect. The soft ones had become the saviors of light, not through might, but through courage and cleverness. When they landed back on Valkyries Prime, the people lined the streets, watching the two leaders walk side by side, the towering king and the small human. Tarek met them at the palace gates. The Union has sent messages, he said with awe. They call you the Thinker of Light. Elias laughed quietly. That's too much credit. I just didn't want anyone else to be afraid. The king placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. Fear is not weakness, human. It is a reminder to act with wisdom. And today you have shown the stars what wisdom looks like. That night, as Elias sat on the palace balcony, he looked up at the endless sky. Somewhere out there, the blight still stirred. Contained but alive, a silent reminder that even darkness could learn fear. He thought about home, about Earth, small and blue, shining far away among the stars. He smiled. For the first time in galactic history, humanity had not just survived. They had taught. And far behind him, in the shadows of the hall, the Predator King watched the human quietly. In his heart, something had changed, a new respect deeper than words. He whispered softly to himself, strange prey. Perhaps not prey at all. The galaxy seemed quieter after the battle with the Void Blight. Systems once filled with the hum of activity now paused to recover, but the memory of the darkness lingered like a shadow at the edge of the stars. Commander Elias Ward returned to Valkyries Prime as a hero, yet he knew the work was far from over. The Blight had been contained but not destroyed. Every scientist, every captain, every observer agreed. It was only a matter of time before it tested the galaxy again. Hrothgar, the Predator King, summoned Elias to the palace once more. The King's massive claws rested lightly on the table of carved stone, his golden eyes reflecting the glow of distant suns. "You have taught my people patience and wisdom," the king said. "But patience alone will not protect us if the blight changes. We must learn to act together. Humans, Velcarians, and all others. You will help guide this effort." Elias nodded. "We can create a network, Your Majesty. Fleets, satellites, and systems working together. A living map that can adapt to any movement." The king's expression softened. "Your mind works differently than ours. We rely on instinct and strength. You rely on reason and foresight. Perhaps this is why the stars listen when you act." Elias smiled faintly. Sometimes the smallest change in thought can change the outcome of everything. Over the next few weeks, Elias worked alongside scientists and engineers from dozens of worlds. The Velcarians taught their methods of tracking, sensing, and energy control, while Elias introduced human innovations, predictive modeling, adaptable signaling, and team coordination that allowed everyone to share responsibility without confusion. The young hunters of Velcaris watched him with fascination. Some mimicked his methodical approach, carefully analyzing every decision before acting. Others began to trust the wisdom of others instead of rushing forward with raw strength. Tarek, who had once doubted the human, now observed Elias closely. "I have never seen a human move so carefully and still influence so much," he said one evening. "It is as if your thoughts are a kind of energy the rest of us cannot feel." Elias laughed lightly. "Perhaps it is, but it is also simple. We survive by thinking ahead, by understanding patterns." The two spent long nights calibrating sensors, testing signals, and building strategies. They laughed, argued gently, and learned to respect each other's ways. What began as curiosity turned into mutual admiration. Then, one day, reports arrived that the blight had shifted. Despite being contained, its energy patterns began moving in strange loops outside the barrier. Satellites detected small pulses, irregular but unmistakable. The council panicked. "It is breaking free," one delegate shouted. "We are not prepared." Elias stepped forward calmly. "It is not breaking free, it is exploring, learning. That is why we must adapt quickly. If we panic, we give it advantage. If we observe, we gain understanding." Hrothgar nodded, placing a hand on the human's shoulder. "You speak well, human. Let us lead together." The Velcarians deployed fleets once again, this time with Elias coordinating from the command center. The human's presence had become more than guidance. It was a symbol of hope. Warriors who had once mocked him now followed his instructions with unwavering trust. The blight moved closer to a critical star cluster. If it reached these systems, entire civilizations would be at risk. Elias studied the readings carefully. Its movements were erratic, but not random. Every step showed a pattern, like a predator learning the rhythm of its prey. He turned to the king. "We need to anticipate its steps before it can react. I will divide our fleets into sections. Each section will create decoy energy trails, while others remain invisible. It will follow the decoys and never see the real targets." Hrothgar's eyes narrowed. "It is dangerous." "Everything worth doing is," Elias replied simply. When the fleets were in position, the stars dimmed unexpectedly. A hush fell across the command center. The blight's energy was approaching faster than anticipated. Light from distant suns seemed to bend and warp as it passed through the void toward them. "Maintain formation," Elias ordered. "Do not deviate." The fleets obeyed with precision, following signals that pulsed like a heartbeat. The blight approached, silent and hungry, absorbing the faint glow of distant planets along the way. Elias watched the monitors, adjusting the signals constantly. Each change in rhythm, each subtle variation, kept the blight curious and cautious. It was studying, trying to anticipate the next movement, but the human's mind was always one step ahead. Hrothgar leaned over the controls. "You are different, human. While the rest of us react, you think. While we fear, you observe. Perhaps this is why your species endures." Elias nodded. We survive because we never stop asking, what can we do next? Not because we are stronger, faster, or larger, just because we refuse to give up. The king's voice softened. And that perhaps is strength the galaxy has forgotten. Hours passed. The Blight advanced slowly, unaware that it was being led into a containment trap far larger than the last. The human and the Valkyrian fleets moved like dancers across the void, each step precise, each motion coordinated, each signal carefully measured. Finally, the moment came. The Blight entered the center of the trap. Elias held his breath as he activated the final sequence. Energy fields enveloped the Blight, shimmering like a web of light. The void recoiled, almost aware of its new limitation. For a tense moment, nothing moved. Then the containment grid locked fully in place. The Blight was held. Not destroyed, but constrained, unable to spread further. The fleet erupted in quiet cheers, careful not to disrupt the fragile energy field. Hrothgar turned to Elias, eyes shining with a mix of pride and wonder. You did it again, human. Once more your mind has saved what strength alone could not. Elias shook his head gently. We did it together. No one acts alone in the stars. When the fleets returned to Valkyries Prime, they were greeted with celebrations unlike anything Elias had imagined. The streets were filled with cheering Valkyrians and other Union species. Humans once laughed at were now recognized as protectors of the galaxy. Children who had never seen a human before stared wide-eyed as Elias walked among them. Young Valkyrian hunters ran alongside him, mimicking his careful gestures, listening to his words. Hrothgar approached him in the center of the square. His massive hand rested on the human's shoulder. From this day, all who doubt your species must remember this. You are no longer prey. You are teachers, leaders, and guardians. Elias smiled. We are only trying to do what is right. The galaxy will always have challenges, but courage, teamwork, and understanding can overcome even the darkest threat. The king nodded. Your courage is contagious, and your heart, human, has earned a place among ours. That evening, as the sun set over Valkyries Prime, Elias sat with the king in the high hall. Outside, the stars twinkled like scattered jewels reflecting off the palace towers. Do you think it will return? Elias asked softly. The king's eyes glimmered. Perhaps. But now we are ready. Not because we are stronger, but because we have learned to think together. And that lesson, human, is yours. Elias looked at the stars and thought of Earth, small and distant. He imagined its blue oceans, green forests, and the people who had entrusted him with hope. A smile spread across his face. The stars are not as dark as they seem, he said. We may be small, but even small lights can guide the way. The king placed his massive hand on Elias's shoulder. From this day, you are no longer a visitor in our world. You are a brother. For a moment, the weight of the words sank in. Elias realized that humanity had earned not just respect, but a place in the hearts of the galaxy's fiercest warriors. And as the two of them looked out at the night sky, there was a quiet understanding. The stars had changed, and so had the way the galaxy would see humans forever. The twin suns of Valkyries Prime rose together, spilling golden light across the city. Commander Elias Ward walked beside Hrothgar, the Predator King, along the wide terraces of the palace. The streets below were alive with celebration. Beings from countless species lined the avenues, waving banners and cheering the small human who had changed their galaxy. It was not just a celebration of victory over the Void Blight. It was a celebration of humanity itself. Elias looked at the king. I never imagined it would feel like this, he said softly. Hrothgar's deep voice rumbled with amusement. Few do. You come from a world so small, yet your courage and wisdom have reached the hearts of the galaxy's strongest. That alone is extraordinary, Elias shook his head. I didn't do it alone. Everyone, humans, Valkyrians, the fleets worked together. I only tried to see what others might have missed. The king regarded him carefully, his golden eyes thoughtful. Perhaps that is why you are human. You see value where others see weakness. The human smiled faintly. Maybe that's what makes us survivors. Inside the Grand Council Hall, representatives from all species had gathered once more. The atmosphere was charged, not with fear but with anticipation and respect. The memory of the blight, though contained, reminded everyone that the galaxy was full of challenges. Hrothgar rose from his throne and addressed the assembly. Today we acknowledge something long overlooked. Humanity, small, fragile, new, has taught us that strength is not always measured in size, power, or weapons. Sometimes strength is thought, courage, and heart. Elias stepped forward beside him. He looked around at the assembly. Insectoid diplomats, crystalline scholars, feathered warriors, and countless others. All eyes were on him, and yet he felt no fear. "Thank you," he said simply. "We humans are far from perfect, but we have learned to observe, to adapt, and to trust each other. If we work together, even the greatest darkness can be faced." A silence followed, not of doubt, but of contemplation. Then the king spoke again. "Elias Ward has proven himself not just as a leader, but as a brother of Velkaris. From this day forward, humans will no longer be seen as weak or prey. You are our allies, our partners, and our teachers." The council erupted in applause. Hands, claws, wings, and crystal appendages clapped, tapped, and shimmered in acknowledgement. For the first time, humanity's name carried weight among the stars. After the ceremony, Elias walked through the palace gardens with Hrothgar. The gardens were unlike any on Earth. Massive plants with glowing leaves, streams of silver liquid, and trees that hummed softly with energy. Yet the beauty of it was nothing compared to the feeling of respect and trust that now flowed between them. "You have changed my people," the king said quietly. "They speak of patience, understanding, and thoughtfulness, qualities we once overlooked. They follow you not because they fear, but because they believe." Elias looked at him. "I think they always believed in some way. They just needed someone to show them that even the smallest voice matters." The king nodded. "And you have shown it, human. You are my brother now." The word struck Elias deeply. It was more than a title. In the Velkarian culture, to call someone brother was the highest honor. It was a bond of trust, respect, and shared destiny. "I am honored," Elias said sincerely, "and I will do my best to live up to it." The king smiled faintly. "Do not worry. Your actions have already spoken louder than words. That is enough." News of the human who became a predator's brother spread quickly across the Union. Stories appeared in every city, every planet, every star station. Humans were no longer whispered about as weak, insignificant creatures. They were admired for courage, intelligence, and moral strength. Back on Earth, messages arrived from Velkaris Prime and other member worlds. Children read about Elias and dreamed of one day traveling to the stars. Scientists debated his strategies and applied human thinking to new problems. Leaders sought guidance from humans on teamwork, strategy, and diplomacy. Elias received one message from a young Velkarian hunter. It said simply, "We thought humans were small and weak, but you showed us that thinking, caring, and courage are the strongest weapons. Thank you, brother." He smiled as he read it, realizing that the lessons of Velkaris Prime could now help not only his world, but the galaxy itself. Despite the celebrations, Elias knew the galaxy remained fragile. The void blight, though contained, was still alive. It moved slowly, silently, learning. The galaxy could not rely solely on one human or one fleet. Preparation, unity, and cooperation were essential. He worked tirelessly with Hrothgar and others to build a permanent alliance network. Fleets from different worlds shared resources. Scientists exchanged data freely, and intelligence was pooled into one cooperative system. The galaxy was no longer a place of isolated species. It was a web of unity. And at the center of that web, humans, once considered fragile and insignificant, were a beacon of hope. One evening, after months of coordination, Elias and Hrothgar stood together on a cliff overlooking the glowing capital city. The twin suns had set and the stars shimmered above like scattered diamonds. "You have done more than survive," Hrothgar said. "You have inspired. You have united. You have reminded us that courage and wisdom are as important as strength, and for that I am proud to call you my brother." Elias looked at the stars, then back at the towering predator. "I never expected this," he admitted. "To be respected, even celebrated, by a king? It is more than I imagined for humanity." The king laughed softly. "Expect nothing, human. Live with purpose, and the universe will reward you in ways you cannot imagine." They stood in silence for a long while, the light of distant stars reflecting in their eyes. It was a quiet victory, not of conquest or power, but of understanding, courage, and unity. The years that followed saw humans take a central role in the Union, not as rulers but as advisors, problem solvers, and ambassadors of hope. Young humans trained with Valkyrians, learning their ways of discipline and observation, while teaching Valkyrians the value of patience, creativity, and empathy. Together, they solved challenges from unstable stars to diplomatic conflicts that once seemed impossible. Elias continued to serve as a leader, but he also taught others to find strength in thought and collaboration. The galaxy began to change, slowly but surely. No longer were humans laughed at. No longer were they underestimated. They had proven, through courage, intelligence, and heart, that even the smallest and weakest-seeming species could shape the destiny of countless worlds. On Valkyries Prime, a grand statue was erected in honor of the first human to stand among giants. It depicted Elias standing tall, hand raised toward the stars beside Hrothgar the king, in a gesture of brotherhood. Beneath it, a simple inscription read, "Courage is not in size, strength is not in claws, wisdom is in heart." Children of all species visited the monument reading the words aloud. They learned that even the smallest voice could echo across the stars. Elias stood quietly before the statue, accompanied by the king. Hrothgar's massive hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "Do you ever feel small?" the king asked quietly. "Sometimes," Elias admitted, "but then I remember that even small things, a thought, a choice, a single action, can change the universe." The king nodded. "And that, my brother, is the lesson every being must learn." As they gazed at the stars, Elias felt a deep peace. Humanity had earned a place among the stars, not through violence or fear, but through courage, understanding, and heart. And somewhere, beyond the light and shadows, the galaxy listened. The darkness of the void blight might return one day, but the galaxy was no longer alone. Together, humans, Valkyrians, and all other species would face it, not with fear, but with unity, wisdom, and courage. For the first time, humanity was not the underdog. Humanity was a beacon, and the Predator King, once a figure of mockery to them, now called a human brother. It was a new dawn for the stars. In the distant galaxy of Vereen, countless civilizations had risen and fallen. Great empires ruled the stars, built fleets, and forged alliances. Yet among all their records, one name appeared again and again: humans. Some called them the first explorers of the stars. Others said they were destroyers, while a few whispered they were saviors. But everyone agreed on one thing: humans were gone. They were nothing more than a myth told to children and studied by curious scholars. For thousands of years, no one had seen a real human. The stories about them were mixed with legends of ancient wars and lost worlds. To most people, they were just old tales from a forgotten age. Among those who still believed in such stories was Virex, a young alien historian from the world of Talcor. Virex belonged to a tall, thin species with glass-like skin that glowed faintly in the dark. He worked in the Galactic Archive, a quiet place filled with data crystals, maps, and forgotten transmissions. Virex often stayed long after his work hours ended, reading old logs and reports about humans. His friends laughed at him for chasing ghosts of the past, but he didn't care. Something about those stories made him curious. There was a strange warmth in the way ancient writers spoke of humans. Brave, stubborn, hopeful even when facing doom. One night, while reviewing an old data signal that had never been translated, Virex noticed something strange. The signal wasn't random. It repeated in a steady rhythm. He ran it through translation filters, and slowly, words began to appear on his screen. "This is Commander Elias Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are going into stasis. For those who find this..." "Remember us," Virex froze. His heart pounded. He had read thousands of old signals, but none had ever identified itself as Terran. The word Terran was ancient, one of the oldest known human terms for themselves. He played the message again. The voice was deep and calm, carrying an emotion he couldn't describe. It sounded like both hope and sorrow. Virex immediately contacted the Archive Council. "Honored elders," he said, "I found a real human signal. It's genuine. I can prove it." The elders were not impressed. "Virex, we've told you before, ancient signals are tricks of the void. The humans never existed. You waste your talent on fantasies," but Virex didn't stop. Something in that voice made him believe. He studied the signal for days, tracing its origin to a dead system at the edge of the galaxy, the Sol system. It was said to be where humanity once lived before they vanished. Without permission, Virex took an old research vessel, the Starseeker, and set a course for Sol. It was a dangerous journey through forgotten regions filled with drifting wrecks and unstable wormholes. Many ships that entered that space were never seen again. After weeks of travel, the red world of Mars appeared before him, dry, silent, covered in dust. The once mighty cities were nothing but ruins, yet his scanners picked up faint energy below the surface. Impossible, Virex whispered. There's power down there. He guided the Starseeker into a narrow canyon where an ancient door stood hidden beneath centuries of rock. Strange human symbols glowed faintly on its surface. He pressed a sequence on his scanner, and the door opened slowly with a deep rumble, sending dust into the air. Inside was a vast underground chamber, an entire city buried beneath Mars. Gigantic metal halls stretched as far as his eyes could see. Machines hummed softly, powered by reactors still running after thousands of years. At the center of the chamber stood hundreds of transparent pods. Inside them were tall figures, humans. Their faces were calm, their bodies strong even in sleep. They looked like statues frozen in time. Virex stepped closer to one pod and wiped away the dust. The name etched on it read, Commander Elias Kane. For a long moment, Virex just stared. He couldn't believe it. The legends were true. Humans had not vanished, they were waiting. He connected his translator to the control panel beside the pod. The ancient screen flickered to life, showing human script. Virex carefully ran a power bypass to the main system, restoring energy to the cryo chamber. Suddenly, one of the pods hissed. Steam escaped from the edges and lights turned from red to green. The man inside, Commander Kane, moved. His eyes opened slowly, sharp and focused. The historian stumbled back, trembling. The human sat up, his movements heavy from long sleep. He looked around, his gaze finally landing on the alien standing before him. Who are you? Kane asked, his voice rough but steady. Virex's translator repeated the words in his language. My name is Virex, You are human? Kane blinked, studying the creature before him. Human, yes, how long have we slept? Virex hesitated. According to our calendar, almost 10,000 years. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Kane stood up slowly, his boots echoing on the metal floor. His expression was unreadable, part sadness, part determination. 10,000 years, he whispered. Then everything we built, everything we fought for, is gone. Virex nodded gently. You were believed to be a myth. The galaxy has changed. Many empires now rule the stars. Most never believed your kind was real. Kane smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. We wanted it that way. We chose to sleep so the galaxy could heal. But it seems the world still needs us. He looked around at the rows of sleeping humans. Are all these pods still functioning? Virex checked his scanner. Yes, most of them. Around 700 life signs remain stable. Kane placed a hand on the glass of a nearby pod. Then humanity still breathes. The historian couldn't stop himself from asking, why did you hide yourselves? Why erase your own history? Kane looked at him, his eyes calm but filled with a quiet power. Because we lost ourselves. The wars we fought destroyed entire systems. We built weapons too powerful to control, so we decided to disappear before we destroyed everything we loved. He walked to the main console and activated a holographic projection. It showed a map of the old human territories, vast and filled with light. Then the lights faded one by one until only darkness remained. That was the end, Kane said softly. We called it the collapse. Virex felt both awe and sadness. The humans were not just warriors. They were dreamers who had tried to save others from their own mistakes. Kane turned to him again. You came here alone, why? I wanted to know if the stories were true, Virex admitted. I wanted to see if hope could survive beyond time. Kane nodded. Then your hope woke us. He began activating the control panels around the room. Lights flared across the buried city. Machines that had slept for ages roared back to life. Outside, the thin Martian air trembled as hidden satellites powered up in orbit. Across the galaxy, sensors on faraway stations started to detect an unknown signal, one that hadn't been heard for 10,000 years. A voice echoed across the stars, ancient and clear. This is Commander Elias Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. Humanity has awakened. We are returning. In distant corners of the galaxy, leaders of alien empires froze when they heard the signal. Some felt disbelief, others fear. Old warnings written in their histories came to mind, about the race that once fought gods and won. In the Archive Council chamber on Talcor, the elders listened in silence. One of them finally whispered, "It cannot be. The humans were just legends." Virex's transmission reached them moments later, showing Kane standing among the glowing pods. "The legend," Virex said proudly, "has returned." Commander Kane looked up at the holographic stars projected above him. His eyes were filled with determination. "If the galaxy has forgotten who we were," he said, "then we'll remind them, not as conquerors, but as protectors." He turned to Virex. "Tell your people this. Humanity did not die. We were only waiting for the right moment to rise again." The sound of awakening machinery filled the halls, and one by one the other pods began to open. Virex watched in awe as the humans stirred, their faces illuminated by soft blue light. History was no longer a story. It was alive again. And somewhere beyond Mars, in the endless dark, the galaxy began to whisper in fear and wonder. The humans had returned. The ancient halls beneath Mars were alive again. Machines that had slept for 10,000 years glowed with new light. The steady hum of power filled the underground city. Dust fell from the ceiling as turbines slowly began to spin, pushing warm air through long-forgotten corridors. Virex stood near a control terminal, his glass-like skin reflecting the soft blue lights. Around him, hundreds of human pods were opening one after another. Each one released a faint mist, revealing the faces of those who had once ruled the stars. Commander Elias Kane watched silently as his people woke. He walked among them, helping some stand as they tried to adjust to the world after their long sleep. His uniform was old but still sharp, a symbol of discipline and pride. "Commander," said a woman with short dark hair as she stepped from her pod, her voice weak but steady. "How long has it been?" Kane answered quietly, 10,000 years, Captain." "We're in the far future now." The woman, Captain Mira Holt, looked shocked but quickly nodded. Then humanity truly survived its own end. Kane smiled faintly. "Barely, but we endure. That's what we do." Virex approached them slowly, still unsure how to act around living legends. "Commander," he said, "I must tell you. The galaxy has changed greatly. The old star nations are gone. There is a new power now, the Varn Dominion. They rule most of the galaxy." Kane turned to face him. "The Varn Dominion?" Virex nodded. "They control hundreds of worlds. Many races serve them. They use fear and advanced machines to keep everyone in line. Some call them protectors, but most know they are conquerors." The commander's expression hardened. "And the others? Are there free worlds left?" "Very few," Virex said sadly. "Small planets, hidden colonies, but none strong enough to stand against the Dominion." Kane looked up at the flickering holographic map that now filled the control room. It showed the galaxy, vast, filled with thousands of systems. The Varn Dominion's territory glowed red, covering almost everything. Only a few small regions shone blue or gray, marking independent worlds. Mira Holt clenched her fists. "So history repeats itself. Tyranny never dies," Kane nodded slowly. "Then we'll remind them what freedom means." He turned to Virex. "You said the Varn rule with fear. What about the people under them? Do they resist?" "Some do," Virex replied. "But the Dominion's control is strong. They destroy any sign of rebellion before it spreads." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll give them something they can't destroy, hope." For the next few days, the buried human city came alive. The humans moved quickly, repairing old systems, reactivating generators, and restoring data from their archives. Virex watched in amazement as these ancient beings worked with speed and precision, as if their long sleep had never slowed them. Every machine they touched came back to life. Huge construction drones floated through the halls, cleaning the dust of millennia. Storage rooms opened, revealing weapons, tools, and armored suits made of dark metal. "What are these?" Virex asked one engineer who was inspecting a long silver object. "This," the human said with a smile, "is a pulse rifle, old but reliable." The historian stepped back a little, nervous but curious. "Your technology still works after all this time?" The engineer nodded proudly. "We built things to last." Commander Kane stood in the main command center studying the status of Mars's defense grid. The ancient orbital cannons were damaged but repairable. The network of satellites surrounding the planet could be restored with enough time. He turned to Mira. Begin reactivating the Terran defense network. Start with communication satellites. We need to know what's happening beyond Mars. Yes, sir. Virex approached cautiously. Commander, what will you do once your people are ready? Kane looked at the glowing map again. We'll rebuild. Humanity once guarded these stars. We can do it again. But the Varn Dominion... Kane raised a hand. The Varn will come eventually. They'll hear our signal. When they do, I want them to see what they feared most. The return of humanity united. Days turned into weeks. The underground city grew brighter and busier. Virex learned much about humans during that time. They were not what the old stories said. They were not monsters or warmongers. They laughed, they argued, they shared food and stories of a world long lost called Earth. Earth? Virex asked one evening as they ate together. Was that your home? Yes, said Captain Mira, the cradle of our kind. Blue oceans, green lands, white skies. But it was destroyed during the collapse. We never returned. Virex looked sad. I wish I could have seen it, Mira smiled softly. Maybe one day when we rebuild, you'll see the worlds we create next. On the 12th day after the awakening, Kane received the first external signal. It came from a nearby communication relay still functioning after millennia. The screen flickered, showing the image of several strange ships moving through space. Varn patrols, Virex said quickly. They scan every sector for unusual activity. Kane nodded. Then they'll soon find us. He turned to his officers. We must prepare. Activate stealth systems. Do not engage until I give the order. The humans worked swiftly. Shields flared around the base, bending light and hiding their presence from scanners. Still, the Varn patrol detected faint traces of power near Mars. They sent a small drone to investigate. Inside their ship, the Varn commander, a tall being with golden armor, stared at the readings. These energy signatures. They are ancient. Could it be human technology? The officer beside him shook his head. That is impossible, sir. The humans are myths. The commander narrowed his eyes. Then let us confirm the myth. He sent a report to the Dominion High Command. On Mars, Virex received intercepted data from the Varn ship. Commander, they've detected us. They're sending information to their leaders. Kane sighed. Then the galaxy will soon know we're awake. There's no hiding now. He placed both hands on the control console. Prepare to send our own message. Mira looked at him. A message to whom? Kane smiled faintly. To everyone. Moments later, across dozens of star systems, a powerful transmission broke through every network, every security wall. It carried a simple signal that had not been heard in 10,000 years. This is Commander Elias Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. Humanity has returned. We do not seek conquest. We seek balance, unity, and freedom for all who live under the stars. Across the galaxy, billions of beings stopped what they were doing and listened. Some thought it was a trick. Others wept. And in secret places, small groups of rebels began to whisper a single word. Humans. Virex stood beside Kane as the message finished broadcasting. You just declared your existence to the whole galaxy, he said quietly. Yes, Kane replied. It's time they knew the truth. What if the Varn respond with war? Kane looked toward the stars projected on the holographic screen. Then we will remind them what humanity stands for. Not for destruction, but for courage, for the right of every being to live free. Virex was silent for a while, then smiled softly. I think the galaxy will remember you not as myths, but as hope. Kane nodded. Let's hope we live up to that name. The following weeks were tense. More human ships were reactivated and launched into orbit. The first small fleet made of ancient but powerful vessels now guarded Mars's skies. They called it Task Force Phoenix, a symbol of rebirth. Virex watched one of the ships rise into the red sky. Its hull shone silver against the sunlight, its engines burning bright. The sound of its thrusters echoed through the thin air. He felt a mix of fear and admiration. The humans were like nothing he had ever seen, calm but fierce, patient but ready. Late that night, he stood on a high balcony overlooking the awakening city. Commander Kane joined him. You've changed everything, Virex, Kane said quietly. Without you, we would still be asleep. The alien shook his head. No, Commander. You changed everything. I only believed in the stories, Kane smiled faintly. Sometimes belief is all it takes. They both looked up at the sky where distant stars shimmered. Somewhere out there, the Varn Dominion was preparing their response. And on Mars, the legend of humanity was no longer a story. It was alive, breathing, building, and ready to face the galaxy once more. The humans had returned not as ghosts of the past, but as the guardians of tomorrow,